This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 340 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 30th of June 2025. I'm Joe, and with me are Fabian.
29 degrees Celsius and dying.
Graham.
Good evening.
And Will.
Also hot.
Lots of news to talk about. Firstly, some good gaming news. Steam Beta finally enables Proton on Linux fully, making Linux gaming simpler.
Seems like great news all round. I was reading the article and it seems there have been some situations where it was on, but it wasn't fully on, and then it was off, but it showed as being on, and was just generally confusing about the current state of it, and people weren't able to confidently predict whether something was going to work, and they'd have to debug it. And now it's just going to be on all the time. It should make things a lot easier. You should be able to install a game from Steam and it will just work without you having to change any settings. And that sounds like a great improvement.
Kind of. Although, the game I play quite a lot was Isonzo, and it had a Proton, or rather I did a Proton install, but I switched back to actual Linux install. So I'm not quite sure. Does that mean that all Linux installs are going to upgrade to Proton from now on?
Not if there's a Linux native version.
Okay, right. So that declaration in the game file obviously then does that. Okay, but obviously you can still manually do it then.
I would imagine so, yeah.
Yeah, you see, they've tried to make it easy, and I think it's even more complicated now because I don't know.
Well, I think the idea is you just install it and don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
I want to worry about it.
Before now, if you wanted the Windows version running on your Linux machine, you had to select Proton manually if it worked and if it was the beta channel. So I guess this makes it seamless in preparation for SteamOS.
Controversial?
I don't know. No, I have no idea. I have to say that it's still the good news story that keeps on giving. It's still running brilliantly for me. I've been playing Death Stranding this week because the sequel was released, and it runs brilliantly on the Steam Deck.
Well, Ars Technica did some testing with the Lenovo Legion Go S, which you can buy with either Linux or SteamOS. So it's a really good candidate to do some A/B testing. And with the exception of one or two games here and there, games running in Proton had higher frame rates than on Windows.
I don't understand the science behind that result, but I do trust them to have done the testing, especially somebody reputable like Ars Technica. So this is remarkable, and I think exactly the sort of news that hardcore gamers are going to lap up. Like, they care about FPS, and if they can get a few more by running Linux, then they're probably going to give it a try, I would think. So I think this is good news for Linux generally.
Well, this does confirm what Jason told us about. Jason Evangelo, we had him on the show ages ago. It must be nearly a year. I don't know. I lose track of time. But anyway, last time he came to talk to us, or me, he said the same thing, that even though you've got to deal with Proton and everything, Linux is just so much more efficient generally that you end up with as good or even slightly better performance than on Windows, because Windows is just so bogged down with bullshit. Well, somewhat related, Fedora Linux devs discuss dropping 32-bit packages, potentially bad news for Steam gamers. Well, this turned into quite a row with lots of heated debate, and now this proposal has been withdrawn, essentially. And in the middle of that debate, Kyle from Bazite said that it would basically mean that project shutting down if Fedora removes 32-bit support completely. But the bottom line is this needs to happen. 32-bit is basically dead, and it only really exists in a few niche cases, one of which is gaming.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Wayland versus X stuff that went on last week. It's like, the writing's been on the wall for quite a while, hasn't it?
Well, the canonical change of plan was back in 2019, so, at least 6 years ago, let's say. And here we are in 2025, where it is still a problem, so much so that Fedora are in exactly the same position that Canonical were 6 years ago. We say that we think that Valve should do something about this. They've had 6 years and haven't done it. There must be a very low-level underlying technical reason not to do it. I just don't know what that is.
Yeah, funnily enough, I think it was almost this week, 6 years ago, because we talked about it and I went back and listened to it. And the solution that you lot came up with for Ubuntu was to get rid of most of the 32-bit binaries and only build exactly what was needed for gaming. And I think there were a couple of other things like printing and stuff like that. So maybe that's what Fedora is going to have to do. But it's not a great compromise, is it? Because you want to just completely stop building the 32-bit x86. Oh, yeah, I had to make this point last time. We're talking about 32-bit x86, not ARM. That's completely unrelated to this. But yeah, it's not an ideal solution, is it, to have to hang on to some packages?
Surely some of the problem here is the fact that for games and like, it's a binary that already exists and the developer may or may not still exist. And, you know, what do you do in those cases? Nobody wants to see software sort of just die, but yeah, maybe it kind of has to.
Well, some of the modern packaging distribution methods solve this problem, don't they? Like if you had a Flatpak, you could stick some 32-bit binaries in there and it would still work.
Yeah, but someone's still got to maintain those 32-bit binaries.
There's also a link to an article on Gaming on Linux about Wine 9 bringing 32-bit compatibility to 64-bit systems. So it sounds like Wine are working on a solution to this underlying problem. I mean, this was January 2024, so maybe they've made some progress there, but it sounds like it's still a sufficient problem.
It's quite funny that we're talking about this directly after talking about a technology that allows almost the entire simulation of Windows system calls to work at a higher performance. And we're talking about something that, you know, the Amiga was 32-bit. Like Phelim said, maybe it's like the Wayland thing, because it always just works. No one's really properly solved the problem by, I suppose, putting some effort into creating some kind of shim or some translator to the 32-bit locations that those libraries need to provide.
So people who know Windows, has that gone fully 64-bit? I don't think so, right?
No.
So then there's our problem. I mean, we're going to constantly have this ebb of detritus that keeps coming in that's 32-bit, aren't we?
Maybe somebody knows, what is it that Steam uses those 32-bit libraries for? Is it because it needs its own integration with games using those 32-bit libraries, so itself has to insert, you know, its own controller package or its own kind of level on top of those 32-bit libraries? Maybe we just have to accept that they, you know, those games go away, or we understand better what Steam's doing.
Well, either way, the can has been kicked down the road for Fedora, so it's not going to happen in Fedora 44. Who knows when or if they will even do this, but it feels like they have to do it at some point. So a solution needs to be found. The problem is that because Valve controls SteamOS, they will just keep maintaining the 32-bit stuff if they want, and the rest of the distros are just going to be shit out of luck.
And maybe that's okay.
Maybe, but then we just talked about all the great wins for gaming on Linux, and if you can't do that on your favorite distro, then that's going to be shit.
You'd be able to use QEMU or something and run an old version of Linux or Windows even and run your old games that way. I don't know. There's better games than World of Warcraft now.
But I think we have a solution, which is to continue to build those libraries that are needed in 32-bit. It's not massive overhead. It's annoying, I'm sure, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. It's been working for Ubuntu for the last 6 years, apparently, so go for that.
BCash FS might well get kicked out of the kernel quite soon.
Very sad.
I mean, it's been coming, hasn't it?
Yes.
Kent Overstreet, the developer, has been clashing with Linus several times now. They've got pretty far into the release cycle of a kernel version, and he's trying to push what are ostensibly bug fixes, but they're really just features. And he's just not playing the game. And Linus has had enough of it and said, right, that's it. I'll merge this lot into 6.16, but for 6.17, we'll be parting ways, he says.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't seem to like taking any sort of challenge at any of the stuff that's coming in. And Linus seems to be saying, well, if I can't challenge any of your patches, then I don't want you in my project, which is massively fair. Maybe Ken can go and make his own kernel that he can put his own file system in. I mean, maybe that would be the best.
One cannot help but wonder if it shouldn't have been merged into the kernel in the first place. Was it too early?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I didn't overly follow it too much. I think I mixed it up with the other one that starts with a B.
ButterFS.
No, not ButterFS. I know ButterFS. No, there's another one. There was this one, BCash FS, and there was another one that was similar to it. Again, as you can see, I held so much details and in such high regard that I couldn't even remember either two projects or if they were one project. But yeah, I don't know. A file system has to be rock solid for a long time before I'm trusting it. So no thanks. It sounded like a great idea, but no.
Well, we spent almost an entire episode of 2.5 Admins talking about how there might not be another next generation file system. It might be just too difficult.
Yeah, I actually listened on it. Yeah, I thought it was quite good. Probably fair points as well.
Yeah, and it's depressing really because it'd be great to have some other ZFS-like file systems to compete with it.
Yeah, the amount of effort to go in to make sure you don't lose people's data is so colossal that it seems like a very uphill challenge.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Porkbun.com. Porkbun was named the #1 domain registrar from 2023 to 2025 by USA Today and is refreshingly different from the big name players. They're proud to offer at-cost, no markup prices on hundreds of different domain extensions, plus powerful hosting options and incredible support. They've got everything you need from .com domains to specialist ones like .pro, .dev and .xyz. Every domain name at Porkbun comes with tons of freebies like SSL certificates, Whois privacy, DNS, URL forwarding, and hosting trials, because why pay for things that should be free, right? All of these features and tools are backed by incredible support 365 days a year from real humans. And if you do a quick search, you'll see that Porkbun has thousands of 5-star reviews from actual customers. So support the show and go to porkbun.com/LNL25 to get $1 off your next domain name from Porkbun and see why they are the best domain name registrar around. That's porkbun.com/LNL25. There's been a bit of a growing backlash to the idea of open source supply chains. We've got two examples, libxml2's no security embargoes policy, and then a bug that caused some major websites to break, and a fellow who had quite a take on that. But essentially what it boils down to is companies relying on open source software as part of their supply chain, and then expecting developers to fix bugs and security issues in that software for free. And there's kind of a social pressure for these open source devs to do this unpaid work. And people are starting to just have enough of this bullshit from the companies. Like, if you find a problem, supply a fix, or you don't get to moan about it.
100%. I think that guy had the worst possible take. And it brings me back to the curl developer, Daniel Steinberg. He often gets stuff from people complaining because they found curl in their BMW's EULA or something like that on their entertainment system, and the amount of stuff he gets. And he got asked by several companies if he could submit a full proposal for the support of the project based on the fact that they were a government organization, required all their contractors to have blah, blah, blah. And he was like, I don't even know who the fuck you are. Piss off. Like, I think this is a good thing. I mean, it's shitty if you happen to be using these projects, and you're not doing it the right way, and then now you're getting kind of caught out by it, but you should sort of do your own due diligence. They are not your employee. They owe you nothing.
Yeah, the whole thing about like this software is supplied as is with no guarantees and all the rest of it. So yeah, Filippo Valsorda said, if you are an unpaid maintainer, you have no obligation to put in extra work for sure. But if you do take down the banking system of a country once, still not your fault, and people tell you your library is broken, I think you start having a responsibility to either deprecate it, fix it, or at least warn users. We live in a society.
What a crock of shit. Fuck that guy, quite honestly. That is the most ridiculous take.
I can understand the logic of the take.
No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, I understand the logic of it, but also, fuck that guy. No, that's not how this should work.
Yeah, the logic of it is, here, unpaid open source developer, come in here and audit all this code and then fuck off for free. Yeah, good. It's ridiculous. What an arsehole, honestly. I don't know the guy, but he clearly is an arsehole. Check your code and have a local repo vet all your code that you import. Otherwise, it's your fault. It is 100% your fault.
Well, I think more realistically, check the code, and when you find problems, pay for solutions. Either hire the developer of that if they're interested in that, and bring them in-house, pay them full-time or part-time or whatever it is to work on the thing that your company relies on, or create your own thing, whether that's a fork, depending on the license and whether it allows it, or just a complete clean room rewrite of the thing that you rely on. But either way, as a company, if you're relying on something, you don't get to moan about it needing fixes. You've got to pay for those fixes one way or another.
I think I agree with this. I know it's nuanced, and it always shocks me that companies have this expectation that a single maintainer has to behave in a certain way when they can do whatever they want with their project. And if it does nothing else, I hope it makes companies recognize they also have an obligation. It's a two-way contract if they're using this open source software. If it does that, that's enough. I would hope that most open source maintainers, that they would still behave in the best interest of their users. But this gives them a kind of caveat to say, well, no, in certain cases where there's too much expectation put on them, or there's a sense of privilege from whoever happens to be speaking to them, because that's what needs to stop. And we've talked before, you don't have much leverage because of the nature of open source. And having a no security embargo is something that you're totally within your rights to do.
Well, in the LWN article that we'll link to, they link to Mike Hoyle's project maintenance terms, which is a proposal for an extra file that you'd put in your repo that basically says we're not responsible for responding quickly and disclosure schedules and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a good idea. Stick it in there, make it black and white, and have something to point to. Oh, you didn't read this. That's your problem.
And it's pretty shocking that they don't have that expectation anyway by default. Like everything, there's a few people that fuck it up for the rest of us, and sometimes you've just got to put it in writing.
Yeah.
What, you're shocked at the sense of entitlement that companies have about open source?
Oh, you know me, hopelessly naive. I am.
Companies are people too, Joe. Oh, no, hang on. Sorry, they aren't.
All right. Jan Wildeboer posted, I have to tip my hat to Microsoft for having worked so hard to convince the world that the city of Munich failed with their Linux migration. It's, of course, just a big fat lie. Munich is since 20 years growing of their open source footprint. And they've got a website, opensource.münchen.de. So, Graham, how come you didn't know about this? You've got German connections. I should have known as well, shouldn't I, really?
Yeah, I suppose so. We should reach out to our German connections who actually lives in Munich.
We should do, really, yeah. Because, I mean, Microsoft have done a great job of convincing the world that it failed.
That project was wrapped up, wasn't it? It was wrapped up. This is something different, but more successful, it seems. Maybe because it wasn't, just reading this, wasn't a specific initiative in the way that the Linux one was.
Yeah, looking at the website, it seems to be more a list of open source software that they are using extensively throughout Munich. And it's things like Audacity and Digicam and Firefox and FileZilla and so on and so on. So it's good open source software that they're using in place of closed source alternatives. Very good, very impressive. But it isn't, as far as I can tell, the open source desktop.
Phelim, you put this in. Accepting donations on Open Collective. This is Flight Gear. Your favourite, definitely not a game.
Correct, is not a game, yes. It was more for the fact that it seems like, well, obviously, please donate if you can. It was more kind of, though, it's a new system that I hadn't heard of before. So I just thought good to raise awareness of. I don't know much about how they work, Open Collective, but I assume that if the guys from Flightgear are going for it, then it seems to be a pretty good organization. They seem to do a whole range of different stuff, not just like FOSS projects or whatever. And I genuinely think it's good. I want to see more projects asking for cash, or, well, they can obviously ask for other stuff too, but cold hard cash is really good, especially for the likes of distributing large software updates for a worldwide flight simulator. So more of this, I think.
All right. What about GNOME? Their relatively new executive director that we talked about, Stephen Dearbold, has put up a post, donate less.
What?
Well, donate less, but more often, more frequently is the key point here. We would vastly prefer you to donate $10 a month for 1 year, $120 total, than $200 in one lump sum. And then he explains about how it's just better to have regular income. I mean, this is why the whole software industry has moved to this monthly recurring revenue model. And whether that's Adobe or something like GNOME, it just makes more sense to have regular income. I remember us talking about Stephen back in May and saying that like he seemed like quite a good fit for the job and how fundraising is one of the big responsibilities of the executive director. And sure enough, a detailed post explaining why regular donations are a good thing is exactly what he should be doing. I think he is so far proving to be a great hire. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/LNL. Tailscale is a proper VPN for connecting your devices and infrastructure together. Not something that's marketed at people watching foreign streaming services or who want to hide their browsing habits from coffee shop staff. It's the easiest way to connect devices and services to each other wherever they are. PCs and laptops, servers, cloud instances, 3D printers, network storage, connect anything and everything you want wherever it is and get started in minutes. Tailscale's personal plan will always be free, and you get up to 100 devices and 3 users for free with no credit card required. The free personal plan is enough for me to send my offsite backups to my parents' house and to get into my LAN while I'm out and about. But what gave me the confidence to start relying on Tailscale was their straightforward business model. If you want to use Tailscale at an industrial scale, with more users and devices, or take advantage of features like MDM policies, auditing, network flow logging, and priority support, you can join over 10,000 companies as a paying customer. So support the show and go to tailscale.com/LNL and try Tailscale out at home or at work today. That's tailscale.com/LNL. Introducing CC Signals, a new social contract for the age of AI. So this is from Creative Commons. And this is what they say. Creative Commons today announces the public kickoff of the CC Signals project, a new preference signals framework designed to increase reciprocity and sustain a Creative Commons in the age of AI. Which sort of sounds reasonable, I suppose. But David Revoy on Mastodon said, I read your article about your initiative for new licenses for dataset holders in the AI industry. Let's be clear, I do not want to relicense my hundreds of CC BY comic pages to please AI giants. I wish you would support Creative Commons artists suffering from massive plagiarism. You should enforce your own existing licenses against AI mass crawling. It seems like you've joined the battle only after the casualties and still managed to side with the wrong people. Which I think is pretty spot on, really, from my reading of this CC Signals thing.
Yep.
Don't join them. Don't, pander to the AI wankers. Crack down on them, like some of the big publications are doing.
Yeah, they should have an audit trail of every single piece of code that they train their model with so they can attribute proper information to. If they can't do it, maybe they can write themselves an AI that can.
Well, we're not talking about code, are we? We're talking about creative works that are not code, like art, essentially.
Fair, but I mean, the point still stands. Attribution should be given where it should be.
Yeah, but that's basically impossible with the model that they have.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly the problem. They should not exist. Really, that is their problem. And let's face it, they don't make a profit, and they haven't managed to in 3 years of being the top pinnacle of talked about technology. How fucking useless can it be?
Well, yeah, and Microsoft have come out and said that AI for their employees is not optional anymore. All employees are expected to, base their whole workflow on AI bullshit. We might be looking at something that will take down huge companies here. Maybe I'm just dreaming with that, but...
Don't make me cheer for it.
If Microsoft is really mandating that all their employees use AI for everything, it's just going to fucking rot the company from the inside out, isn't it?
I think you should leave that long pause in. Maybe the sound of, wind and rolling tumbleweed.
Well, I know that you are a bit of an AI enjoyer, Will. So you presumably think that it's all fine.
No, not really. I mean, My use of AI is primarily around generation of code, and I think that is kind of okay. Like, one of the founding ideals of open source code was that it was there for people to use and modify and learn from, and I think that's okay. When it comes to things like artwork and creative writing, I think I've got a different opinion than I once had. When it's sort of factual information, stuff that you would otherwise Google, I'm kind of okay with that. But when there's a creative element to it, somehow I'm not. I don't know why. I guess I don't really attach much value to facts. They just exist. Whereas works of art need to be created by somebody. And if you're just churning out, and in this case, we're talking about comic books, if you're just churning out derivative clones of every piece of art that's out there, it just devalues everything. Nobody wins in that case, I think.
But do we not agree that Creative Commons should be doing more to protect people than pandering with this bullshit?
Yeah.
This is really strange because I think Creative Commons did a lot, maybe, I don't know, a long time ago, when things like Flickr became popular and you could suddenly get access to all of these photographs that you could then go and reuse on your websites. And that was a massive enabler for the small website to have some nice looking pictures on their website. You know, you would go to a conference and every single slide would have a photo taken from the internet, but with a CC license on it. And I think it did really great things. So I have a lot of time for Creative Commons. And as a concept, I certainly think it's the right thing to do. But they don't have any, or they don't seem to have anything to back up that sense of goodwill. Like, it's fine. As long as you all obey the rules, everything's fine. But as soon as you don't, or as soon as there's a cause which needs defending, there just seems to be crickets. And that's a real shame. But I guess it was ever thus. It was just never challenged before.
This is quite depressing. I think you're right, Will. I think people enjoy being part of an initiative like Creative Commons, especially when things are moderately positive, but they cannot get involved with conflict. It undermines their identity for themselves and why they're involved with a project like that. And they would rather still be involved in a project like that, it seems, than potentially lose that in some kind of conflict, which they think probably they can't win, so there's no point. But that's not what they should be doing. I agree.
All right, a quick KDE Corner. Plasma 6 is much juicier than I remembered. A video from Nico.
Yeah, Nico has a really cool video, especially if you've not really kept up any of the articles. And he walks you through various things, how they all work and stuff. And yeah, lovely. It's a great display of it all.
All right, and one of Nate's This Week in Plasma posts.
Yeah, so the main reason for this one was, well, obviously there's lots of cool fixes and bug fixes, whatever, new features coming up in 6.5 he talks about. But one of the things was I have seen quite a bit of stuff about, you know, people whinging about X11 going away and, it's been forced upon them and they can't do all the things they wanted to. And yeah, I am sure there are people with issues, but one of them was desktop sharing. And for the past couple of releases, KDE's had a RDP feature built in, which is far more reliable, or rather bandwidth using, than VNC and the like. So, you know, for people who are thinking that they can't have remote desktop share with KDE, that is incorrect. And you can very much use a Wayland session and control it remotely. So, you know, just don't always get the right facts out there about things, I suppose. And maybe that can calm some of these worries people seem to have. I doubt it.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when who knows what it'll be. Probably lots of discoveries. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.